My name is Clara Wexley. I am 34 years old now, a registered nurse in Briar Glen, Kentucky, and I still keep one folded letter in the back pocket of my purse. The paper is soft now. The corners are weak, but every time I touch it, I remember the night my father looked at me during a March thunderstorm and said, "Get out of my house, Clara. I am done carrying a useless daughter." He said it because my brother Dawson told him a lie. He said it because believing his son was easier than seeing the truth. And he said it because in our house, boys made mistakes and girls became the punishment. 3 hours later, a deputy called my parents to the county hospital. I was lying there with mud in my hair, stitches above my eyebrow, and the woman sitting beside my bed was the last person my father wanted to face. His own mother, Etta Wexley, the same woman he had not spoken to in 4 years. But that night was not the end of my story. It was the beginning. Because 2 years later, in front of half the business owners in Briar Glen, my father finally learned what happens when the daughter he threw away comes back with receipts. Briar Glen was the kind of town where people knew your family history before they knew your middle name. My father, Clint Wexley, owned Wexley Brake and Tire on the County Road 12, the same repair shop my grandfather Silas had built, with borrowed tools and a bank loan nobody thought he could repay. The sign outside had our last name painted in red letters. My father loved that sign more than he loved most people. He said it was a man's legacy. My brother Dawson was 21 months older than me, and from the time he could hold a wrench, Dad acted like he had been born to inherit the place. Dawson got weekends at the shop, pocket money from the register, and praise for showing up late. I got dishes, laundry, grocery lists, and my mother's voice saying, "Your brother is tired. He helped your father today." I helped too, just not in a way they respected. By 16, I knew the shop's bills better than anyone. I learned which suppliers were overdue, which customers still owed money, which bank deposits were short, and which months the shop was one bad week away from missing payroll. I made a spreadsheet on an old laptop because the paper invoices were a mess. I called suppliers, arranged payments, fixed the filing cabinet, and saved my father hundreds in late fees. When a customer once told Dad, "Your girl runs that front counter better than most grown men," Dad smiled like he had not heard it. That was his gift. He could erase me without even lifting a hand. The worst part was not being ignored. The worst part was watching Dawson get rewarded for every failure I quietly repaired. He ordered wrong parts. I corrected invoices. He forgot appointments. I called customers and apologized. He misplaced cash receipts. I rebuilt the deposit record. Then, at dinner one night, Dad announced Dawson would become assistant manager after summer. Dawson had failed his trade certification twice and still did not know how to price a brake job without asking me. I looked at my father and said, "I have been keeping your books clean for almost a year." Dad's face hardened. "That is office work," he said. "This shop needs a man." My mother, Marybelle, did not look at me. She only reached for the plates. Then Dad said the line I never forgot. "Sons carry the name, daughters carry the house." Dawson laughed. I did not. I decided that night I would leave after graduation. I had nursing school forms hidden under my mattress, scholarship essays saved on my laptop, and $48 tucked inside a winter sock. I thought I had 4 months left. I was wrong. Sometimes a family does not wait for you to escape. Sometimes it pushes you out early and calls it discipline. The storm came on a Friday night, thick and mean, with rain hitting the windows like gravel. Dawson took the shop's service truck after midnight. He had been using it for weeks, driving to card games and parties, but Dad never asked questions when it was Dawson. That night, he drank at a friend's barn, tried to drive home in heavy rain, and slid the truck into a ditch near Miller's Bridge. The bumper bent, the side mirror broke, and the front tire sank deep into mud. Dawson walked home, came into my room while I was sleeping, took my phone, and sent 2 messages to himself. "Taking the service truck. Don't tell Dad." Then, on County Road 12, He deleted them from my phone and put it back beside my bed. By morning, Dad was standing in the kitchen with Dawson's phone in his hand, already furious. He did not ask me what happened. He told me. "You stole my truck." I said I had been asleep. I told him to check Dawson's boots. I told him to check the mud on his jeans. I told him to ask why Dawson's jacket was dripping behind the laundry door. My mother stood near the stove and whispered, "Clara has been acting proud lately." That was all she gave me. Not defense, not doubt. Just one more stone on my chest. Dad stepped close enough that I could smell black coffee and motor oil on him. His voice was low and cruel. "You have always been jealous of your brother. You break what men build." I looked at Dawson. He stared at the floor. Dad pointed toward the front door. "Get out. I'm done carrying a useless daughter." The thunder cracked so hard the lights blinked. I went upstairs, packed my school folder, 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, and the cash from my sock. Nobody stopped me. My mother watched from the hallway with dry eyes. Dawson leaned against the wall like he was bored. I walked 3 miles in rain, so heavy I could barely see the road. I was going to my grandmother Etta's house. She lived alone past the old church, and my father had not spoken to her since she told him he treated me like Silas had treated his daughters. I made it almost to her gravel drive before I slipped near the culvert. My head hit stone. The world went black. If you have ever been blamed for someone else's sin while your whole family stood there silent, then you already know that the wound is not just what they say. It is who refuses to stop them. Tell me in the comments if you have ever been the one person everyone expected to carry the blame. Grandma Etta found me just after 3 in the morning. She had gone outside to check her fence after the storm, slowed, and her flashlight caught my backpack in the ditch. She called 911 and rode with me to the hospital. When my parents arrived, Dad looked scared for half a second. Then he saw his mother sitting beside me with mud on her boots, and the fear turned into shame. Etta did not stand. She only looked at him and said, "Sit down, Clint." He sat. My grandmother told him she had seen the service truck parked at the shop earlier that night, and she had seen headlights going toward Miller's Bridge after midnight. A deputy came in and said they had found Dawson's wallet under the driver's seat. They had also found beer bottles behind the seat and muddy boot prints that matched the pair Dawson had left by our back door. Dad's mouth opened, but nothing useful came out. My mother almost touched my blanket, then pulled her hand back like loving me might cost her too much. That was the moment I stopped waiting for her. Etta turned to the deputy and said, "My granddaughter is coming home with me." Then she looked at my father. "You threw away the only child who ever protected your business." Dad stared at the floor. Dawson was questioned the next day. The lie fell apart fast. He got probation, a suspended license, and a public record. My father called it a mistake. Grandma called it the first honest paper this family ever had. Living with Etta was not soft, but it was safe. She gave me the upstairs room, hot soup, clean towels, and rules. Morning chores, afternoon study, and no crying over people who sleep fine after hurting you, she said. I started nursing school that fall on a partial scholarship, and Etta paid for my books with money from the small rental houses she owned around town. She had built that quiet little business after Grandpa Silas died, buying old places, fixing porches, renting them fairly, and keeping every receipt in labeled folders. She taught me leases, repairs, tenant calls, taxes, and patience. She also gave me the letter. Silas had written it 5 weeks before he died. In it, he admitted he had raised my father to believe the shop belonged to men. He wrote that his daughters could have helped him, but he never gave them a chance. The last line was underlined twice. "Etta, if Clint repeats my mistake, do not let our granddaughters pay for my blindness." I read that line until my hands shook. My grandfather had seen the pattern too late, but he had still left behind a warning. I folded the letter and carried it with me from that day on. 2 years passed. I graduated nursing school near the top of my class. Etta sat in the front row. My parents did not come. Dawson did not come. But Ruth Ann Pike came. She had worked the front desk at Wexley Brake and Tire for 18 years, and she hugged me like she was proud of me in a way my own mother had never learned to be. After the ceremony, Ruth Ann pulled me aside and said, "Clara, something is wrong at the shop." Cash payments were missing, small ones at first. Oil changes, inspections, tire patches. The work was written in the service log, but the bank deposits came up short. It always happened when Dawson closed alone. Ruth Ann had been keeping copies because she was afraid she would get blamed. She brought the folder to Etta's kitchen 3 weeks later. Register tapes, service logs, bank slips, dates, amounts, closing schedules. I built the spreadsheet in one afternoon, 16 months, $23,000 missing. Every pattern pointed to Dawson. Etta looked at the pages and said, "Your father will not believe this if you hand it to him in private. He will bury it to save the boy." She was right, so we did not take it to him. We took it to the people who could not afford to pretend. That December, Wexley Brake and Tire was nominated for Briar Glen Business of the Year. My father had wanted that plaque for half his life. He wanted the town to clap for the Wexley men, for the shop, for the legacy he thought belonged only to him and Dawson. Etta was on the business board. She requested a financial review before the award was finalized. I prepared a clean report: dates, missing deposits, copies of register tapes, bank comparisons, and a signed note from a retired accountant named Helen Draper, who checked every number twice. The night of the dinner, the community hall was full of business owners, church people, council members, and old men in jackets they only wore twice a year. Dad sat near the front in a gray suit. Dawson sat beside him, smiling like a prince. My mother sat behind them, wearing pearls and fear. When the host called Wexley Brake and Tire as the final nominee, Dad went to the microphone and said, "My father built this shop. I carried it, and now my son will carry it after me. This is the strength of Wexley men." That sentence went through me like cold water. Then Etta stood from the back row. She did not shout. She did not need to. "Before this board votes," she said, "my granddaughter has a report." I walked to the side microphone with the folder in my hands. My voice stayed calm because nursing teaches you that panic does not help bleeding. "Over the last 16 months," I said, $23,000 in cash payments were recorded as collected by Wexley Brake and Tire, but were never deposited into the business account. The shortage appears only on closing shifts handled by Dawson Wexley. The documents have been reviewed by an independent accountant. Dawson jumped up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "She is lying," he shouted. "She is bitter because Dad chose me." I looked at him and said, "No, Dawson. Dad chose you. The numbers exposed you." The room went silent. Board members turned pages. One of them asked about the bank slips. I handed them over. Another asked about the register copies. Ruth Ann stood and said, "I made them. I was afraid I would be blamed." My father stood frozen beside the microphone. His golden sun was shaking. My mother whispered, "Dawson, sit down," because the room was watching now and appearances had finally turned against him. That was the revenge. Not screaming, not begging, just paper on a table, truth in public. And the son who had hidden behind his father, running out of places to stand. The board voted to suspend the award and require a full audit. The plaque was turned face down. My father walked past me on his way out and whispered, "Why would you do this to your own family?" I looked at him and said, "I learned it from you, Dad. You told me the shop belonged to men, so I let the men explain the missing money." He had no answer. Etta stepped to the microphone after he left. She told the room about Silas's letter, about the daughters he ignored, and about the granddaughter Clint had thrown into a storm. Then she announced the Silas Wexley Women's Trade Scholarship, funded by her rental income, for young women in Briar Glen who wanted nursing, dental hygiene, accounting, mechanics, or any skilled work their families told them was not for them. "Girls carry more than dishes," Etta said. "They carry proof. They carry businesses. They carry names that men tried to make too heavy." People stood and clapped. Not everyone, but enough. Enough for me to feel the room change. After that night, the audit confirmed everything. Dawson had taken a little over $24,000. Dad fired him by text because he still did not know how to face the truth out loud. The shop survived, smaller and quieter. Ruth Ann kept her job. My mother called once and said, "I hope you are proud." I told her, "I am not proud of the pain. I am proud I stopped protecting the lie." 6 months later, my father asked to meet me at a diner. He said sorry without excuses. I accepted the apology, but I did not hand him my life back. Forgiveness is not a key you give someone so they can enter every room again. It is a door you decide how far to open. I stayed a nurse. I stayed Etta's granddaughter. I stayed the woman my father called useless, and the one who saved his books from the son he worshipped. Some families teach you love. Some teach you evidence. Mine taught me never to confuse silence with peace. And if this story reminds you of a time your family voted against your worth, remember this. Your value was never up for a vote. Comment your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs strength today. And do not forget to subscribe for more stories where truth takes its time, but still arrives. Commentary. Now let's slow down and talk about what really happened in this story, because this was not only a story about a daughter being blamed. This was a story about a family system that protected the wrong person for years. Clara was not thrown out because she was weak. She was thrown out because she was the one person in the house who could see the truth clearly. Her father did not want truth. He wanted comfort. He wanted his son to be the future of the family business, even when every sign showed that Dawson was careless, dishonest, and dangerous. The most painful part of this story is not just the storm, it is the silence before the storm. Clara's father accused her without checking anything. Her mother stood there and let it happen. Dawson knew he had lied, but he stayed quiet because the family had already trained him to believe someone else would pay for his mistakes. That is what makes this story so emotional. Clara was not only fighting one lie, she was fighting years of being treated as less valuable because she was a daughter. And then we see Grandma Etta. She is not loud, she is not dramatic, but she is powerful because she sees the truth and refuses to look away. She gives Clara a safe home, but she also gives her structure. That matters. Sometimes love is not a long speech. Sometimes love is clean sheets, a warm kitchen, a rule, a plan, and someone saying, "You are safe now." Etta becomes the person who breaks the old family cycle. She understands that the same mistake happened before with her husband, and she refuses to let it happen again to her granddaughter. The revenge in this story is strong because it is not messy. Clara does not scream. She does not beg. She does not chase her father for respect. She builds a life. She becomes a nurse. She learns business from her grandmother. She waits until the truth has documents behind it. And when the moment comes, she does not attack Dawson with anger. She simply brings proof. That is why the public scene hits so hard. In a room full of business owners, her father proudly talks about Wexley men, and then Clara stands up with the very evidence those men tried to hide. This is the real lesson. Truth becomes powerful when it is organized. Clara had dates, records, bank deposits, register tapes, and an accountant's review. Her revenge was not based on emotion alone, it was based on facts. That is why nobody could dismiss her as bitter. Dawson tried to call her jealous, but the numbers did not care about his excuses. Her father tried to protect the family name, but the documents showed what that name had been hiding. Another lesson is that forgiveness does not mean giving people full access to your life again. Later, when Clara's father apologizes, she does not destroy him. She listens, but she also keeps her boundaries. That is mature strength. She does not run back to the shop. She does not become the daughter who fixes everything again. She stays in the life she built for herself. That is important because healing does not always mean going back. Sometimes healing means choosing a new path and walking forward without guilt. This story also teaches us that being ignored does not mean being useless. Clara was invisible in her house, but she was never empty. She had skills. She had discipline. She had a sharp mind. The family failed to see her value, but that did not erase it. Many people, especially older women, may understand this feeling deeply. Maybe you cooked, cleaned, worked, sacrificed, raised children, helped family, and still someone treated your effort like it was nothing. This story reminds us that unseen work is still work. Unrecognized strength is still strength.